Resident Evil 2 was a massive success. I mean, was there any doubt? The game kept the revolutionary gameplay of its predecessor while also making things like the story infinitely more refined and engaging. There was no doubt in Capcom's mind that they had a recognizable brand on their hands. So, what was Capcom going to do next? Well, branch out, of course. While the series had found its home on the PlayStation, there was a bigger market at large. Recognizing this, work began on multiple titles for a variety of consoles. A prequel game titled Resident Evil 0 for the N64, a spin-off titled Code Veronica for the Sega Dreamcast, and of course Resident Evil 3, which was being produced by Hideki Kamiya, meant to release on the PlayStation. Things were going smoothly until Sony made an announcement. This announcement in question was the reveal of their new console, the PlayStation 2. With the next generation of gaming catching Capcom way off guard, they quickly panicked to get with the times. The current version of RE3, which was originally going to star an Umbrella agent named Hunk on board an infected cruise ship, was scrapped, and a new idea was pitched to star Oswald E. Spencer's infected son exploring an Umbrella castle, with this new RE3 meant to release on the PlayStation 2. Before all this chaos began, during development of the DualShock version of RE2, the dev team started throwing around ideas for yet another spin-off. A game meant to serve as somewhat of an expansion that would show off more of Raccoon City. This small game was referred to as Biohazard 1.9/2.1 due to it taking place during RE2. Shinji Mikami, the series creator, was very interested in this project and wanted it to play as more of an indie title instead of the gameplay players were used to, with the city at large burning all around you and zombie spawns being completely unpredictable to scare the player more. However, a head at Capcom by the name of Yoshiki Akamoto thought that this direction would be highly detrimental to sales and decided to throw in some major changes. First, the whole indie aesthetic was scrapped in favor of more traditional RE gameplay. Second, the game was to release 5 months before the PlayStation 2 did, so players in the PS1 would decide to purchase it. And arguably the most important change is the game was to be titled Resident Evil 3, the game Hideki Kamiya was busy with being promoted to Resident Evil 4. Frustrated with all the changes that compromised his vision, Shinji Mikami left Capcom entirely, but this, as we know, was temporary. With most of the devs who worked on RE2 either being gone or busy with another title, RE3 was worked on by a lot of new talent. The writer of RE2 was also pretty damn busy, so most of the writing was done in-house. After a year of major development, the game found its way onto storefronts on September 22, 1999. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is a title I've personally had a weird relationship with. See, I bought the game at the same time I purchased Resident Evil 2, and for those of you who watched me cover that game, you know how much I loved it. So after that, I was really looking forward to trying Resident Evil 3, but after making it about a quarter way into the game, I realized that I just wasn't enjoying it. This was due to some reasons I'll get into later, but I quit playing shortly after, and I didn't pick it up after a whole year. But in light of doing this retrospective, I knew the time came for me to give RE3 a second chance. So I beat the game in both difficulties, and I really liked it. Yeah, I have no idea what the hell happened between 2020 and 2022, but I found myself really enjoying this game. But even though my opinion on this game is mostly positive, don't get me wrong, I still have a lot to say about it, which does include some negatives. However, before we begin this review, I have to come clean. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't record shitty cam gameplay for yet another Resident Evil review. I regret doing it with my past 2 Resident Evil reviews, and I won't do it here. But you might be asking, how the hell am I going to show off gameplay without a capture card or a computer? Well, I did what any sane person would do and just borrowed some from YouTube, particularly from a Let's Play channel titled Sapphire Breeze. I am fairly certain this is okay to do as long as you use the footage in a transformative way, but I'm still going to link their channel in the description. Feel free to check them out, they have a lot of Let's Plays. With that rational decision I should have done 2 reviews ago out of the way, let's talk about
Resident Evil.
Now that you're not looking at shitty cam footage, take a look at the screen. Take it in. What you are looking at is top-of-the-line PlayStation graphics. Since this was made during the final days of the original PlayStation, most developers were comfortable with the software and had found ways to truly push its capabilities to its limits. That and exceptional art direction is what led to Resident Evil 3 looking the best out of the original trilogy. It's no competition, the models are cleaner, the animations, while clunky, are decent for PS1, and the pre-rendered backgrounds showing off the destruction of Raccoon City are hauntingly beautiful. Also, because of that destruction, you'll see fire burning all around you, action-packed scripted sequences that sometimes don't even have to rely on pre-rendered cutscenes, and even things like doors, windows, and other structures blowing up in real time during gameplay. I know that's nothing now, but back then, this was really an achievement. And with the small dev time this game had, it's apparent that Capcom had mastered the RE formula and knew how to make these games at a quick rate. Switching over to the environments, you'll mostly find yourself in the chaos-filled streets of Raccoon City, but other locations include the RPD from the second game, a clock tower, a overrun hospital, and an umbrella lab. One disappointment I have of these environments is they are nowhere near as distinct in tone and atmosphere like the previous game's locations were, with the exception of the clock tower that has this calm, peaceful mood to it. But these locations still look great all the same. Oh, and the game sticks with CG cutscenes to portray the more cinematic moments the story has, and like RE2, they look beautiful and way ahead of their time. Now, regarding the soundtrack, I do have to confess that the OST doesn't quite reach the same levels as RE1 and RE2. The game goes for a more action approach, and because of that, the music tends to be more intense and hectic rather than calm and eerie. That's not to say that OST is all bad though, and there are some outright beautiful tracks such as the save room theme, Free From Fear. The last two games had great save room themes, but this game takes the cake for easily one of the most iconic tracks in the series, and is my personal favorite save room theme. It perfectly captures the seemingly hopeless situation you have found yourself in, while also having a string of hope attached. So I think that wraps things up as far as presentation is concerned. I mean, what else is there to say? The game looks gorgeous. Not only that, but it has a considerable level of polish and is easily without a doubt the best looking PS1 game I've ever seen. But of course, visuals and sound can only go so far. How does the game play? Well, let's get into that. Now, I would have liked to see what Mikami's original vision for this game was, but due to it being promoted as a mainline title, I am very glad they kept the traditional RE gameplay we all know and love. Like the previous games, Resident Evil 3 once again throws you into the world of survival horror. Everything regarding controls are the exact same as the previous outing, and you're once again tasked with finding and conserving valuable resources to survive as you explore, solve puzzles, and make it to the next area. However, that's not to say Resident Evil 3 is without its innovations. In fact, it is easily without a shadow of a doubt more innovative than 2. Starting with small things, you no longer have to command your character to auto-run up or down stairs, and instead you can move around freely. I know it's very minuscule, but it's nice nonetheless. Next is easily my favorite innovation, gunpowder. Across your journey, you can find different grades of gunpowder, gunpowder A and B. You can combine two gunpowders in a specific combination and use the reloading tool to craft ammunition. Depending on your combination, you can craft handgun bullets, shotgun shells, or even grenade rounds. This crafting feature was revolutionary for games in this era, and may have been the first or if not one of the first to do it. And being able to choose which type of ammo you craft gives the player way more options regarding how they want to play and what decisions to make. For example, handgun bullets are very useful to deal with low-tier enemies such as zombies for instance, but they will be completely ineffective against bosses. On the other hand, you could craft grenade rounds or shotgun shells, but then you run out of handgun bullets and you might have to waste such valuable ammunition on petty foes. I absolutely love this system. Unfortunately, the third innovation I'm about to get into is the dodge feature. See, in Resident Evil 3, the player is given a dodge button that, if timed correctly, can have you avoid a bite or a hit. This sounds like an amazing idea. The only problem is they made the dodge the R1 button. You know, the button you use to aim? So more often than not, you'll find yourself completely doing this on accident, and it's also super janky and weird to pull off. It was a neat idea, but the execution was awkward. That's as far as the new core gameplay features go, and I think RE3 does a perfect job of keeping things fresh while simultaneously keeping what makes the series so enjoyable. With just 3 new features, the game already stands out on its own and it feels leagues above the RE2 expansion it was originally supposed to be. And keep in mind, that's just base gameplay additions. Another new crazy innovation is the introduction of decisions. Yep, in multiple different situations, you are faced with making a decision that can actually change your gameplay experience, such as winding up in different locations, fighting bosses early, and can also lead to different cutscenes. Like most things in this game, this was way ahead of its time. RE1 and even RE2 to some extent had a system like this, but nowhere near to this level. And this is just scratching the surface regarding this game's replayability. See, RE3 has a heavy reliance on RNG that can lead to alternative enemy spawns and random herb and ammo placements. Mix that RNG with your decision making and replaying this game will likely offer a different experience. Not to mention there's 2 entirely different ways to play the game in the first place. See, there's 2 different difficulties, easy and hard. A tight selection like this is a player like me's worst nightmare since I play literally every single game on normal. I decided to play this game twice, once on easy difficulty and a second time on hard. Easy is the same game, except it loads you with an endless supply of weaponry, ammunition, heals, and infinite saves. Hard difficulty is kind of inappropriately labeled since it plays like a normal Resident Evil game, only starting you out with a pistol and very few supplies to the traditional save system. I know a lot of Resident Evil purists would advocate you to first play the game on hard no matter what to play the game as it was intended. However, I do think easy plays a vital role. See, this game is one of the harder Resident Evil games I've personally played. And keep in mind, this is the same guy who thinks Code Veronica isn't as difficult as people make it out to be. I've played my good share of RE, and this game still gave me a tough time. I couldn't imagine if someone new to the series picked it up. If you're new to Resident Evil, or at the very least new to classic Resident Evil, I highly recommend playing the game on easy first. But why is this game so difficult? Well, that leads us to getting into the nitty-gritty. As you know, RE3 sees you exploring a zombie-infested Raccoon City. A city with a population of roughly 100,000 people. In case you were wondering, that's a lot of zombies, and the game doesn't shy away from the fact. This is why I am glad I live in the middle of a beach. If there ever is a zombie apocalypse, I will definitely be the last to know about it.
Well, shit.
In RE1 and RE2, there were occasionally rooms and areas that had you facing against 5 to 6 zombies, which is a lot. In Resident Evil 3, however, there are zombies littered everywhere. In multiple instances, they're practically thrown at the screen. You could roughly get away with mowing down most zombies you encountered and still maintain a decent supply of ammo in the past games, but here, you're fucked if you try and solve all of your problems guns blazing. This is the main reason why I think RE3 can be so difficult. You are overwhelmed with the high amount of enemies you encounter, resulting in you having to dodge and weave most of the time, which can be very tricky if you're new to using tank controls. There is that dodge option I mentioned earlier, but like I said, it's pretty clunky. I don't think the sheer amount of zombies all around you is a bad thing, however. It really drives in the chaotic terror this game strives for by having every street, every building, every tiny alleyway not safe. It truly makes you feel vulnerable and overwhelmed, and I love it. But what enemies will you be facing as you desperately try to escape this doomed city? Well, let's go over them, shall we? First are the zombies, obviously. Second are Cerberuses who make occasional appearances. Then there's crows who appear at very minor sections of the game, and also giant spiders who are equally as minor. But what about the new enemies? Well, first there's Drain Demios, insect-like creatures that will attempt to grab you and drain blood. And the Brain Suckers, the previous enemy's stronger relative that requires a great deal of damage to defeat. Next are the Hunter Betas, imperfected hunters that lack the polish of one you'd see in an original game. And there's the Hunter Gamma, an alternate variant of the regular hunter meant to thrive in a more aquatic environment, but were ultimately a failed experiment, which makes them pretty easy to deal with. But you might be wondering, is there another enemy that hasn't been mentioned yet? Well, there sure is. The Sliding Worms. These leech-like creatures would latch onto you while in sewers but do minor damage. Okay, I'm just playing with you. It's time we brought up the elephant in the room. Nemesis. This fucking guy is without a doubt the most iconic part of the game. So iconic, his name is the subtitle of the game. You remember how in RE2, Mr. X would show up occasionally? Yeah, put that on steroids. Nemesis is a tyrant equipped with a fucking rocket launcher with the ability to sprint at full speed. But he's just a mini boss fight, right? Wrong. Nemesis is a stalker who will hunt you down throughout the entire game. No matter where you go or what you do, he will always be there, hunting for you. He is the only enemy who can follow you through doors. He doesn't give a fuck, he will catch you at all costs. The addition of Nemesis makes the player fear even more for their lives, since not only are they in a city swimming in zombies, but they have an armed tyrant hunting them down. You remember that decision mechanic I mentioned earlier? Yeah, well, you are frequently tasked with the option of either running from Nemesis or standing your ground and fighting him. While fighting him runs through ammo like it's nothing, you are rewarded with a rare item and can breathe easy knowing he's down for the count and won't be chasing you for a while. If it's not apparent already, Nemesis was an extremely ambitious feature to the game, and I think Capcom absolutely nailed it. He's a terrifying addition that makes the experience of RE3 much more engaging. Now that we've been over casual enemies and of course Nemesis, what about the boss fights? Well, the first boss fight is the Grave Digger, a giant-ass worm that can dig through city streets. Your first encounter with it is relatively easy and requires pressing 3 switches and a whole lot of dodging. The second encounter is a fight to the death. This boss is admittedly pretty bland, and the Grave Digger's movements make it less than ideal to hit. However, much like William Birkin from the last game, the main boss fights mainly comprise of Nemesis. The first mandatory fight sees him on a speeding cable car that you can actually skip if you just run to the door and try to escape. The second mandatory fight is Nemesis in his second stage, which sees him more aggressive and dangerous. Then you fight his second form again where you can use acidic pipes to damage him. Each of these fights are intense and require you to be on your toes at all times. But how in the world will you defend yourself? With your arsenal, which is comprised of a nice variety of weaponry. There's the knife, yeah, put that away. The handgun, which you'll be using persistently through at least the first half of the game. The shotgun, which is useful for instant decapitations and dealing with both drain demiurses and brain suckers. A grenade launcher that uses fire rounds, acid rounds, grenade rounds, and the newly introduced freeze rounds, which is useful for bosses in tough situations. The mine thrower, don't look at me, I still don't know what the fuck it does. The Magnum, which is the badass high damage weapon it was in the last 2 entries, and the assault rifle, which can be attained in a variety of ways. The other 2 weapons in the main game you can get your hands on are both the Eagle handgun and M327 shotgun by obtaining special parts after defeating Nemesis. And last but not least, there's the fucking rocket launcher you can get if you visit a secret room in the final area with a specific key item. But wait, there's even more. Special weapons you can unlock include an infinite assault rifle, Gatling gun, and rocket launcher. This game has an absolutely insane roster of weapons that are all useful in different situations, and I love it. So is there anything else to go over? Well, I got so excited about everything else, I almost forgot to mention the locations you'll be visiting throughout your journey. And it's here where I think the game is at its weakest. Throughout the majority of the game, you're running through the chaotic streets of Raccoon City, and while Raccoon City itself looks amazing in an apocalyptic sense, I don't think it quite reaches the levels of RE1's mansion and RE2's precinct atmosphere-wise. I get this is unfair since RE3 is going for a totally different atmosphere, but none of the places you visit in RE3 are all that memorable because despite how cool it looks, it's just a city. Not only that, but Raccoon City's size works as a double-edged sword. On one hand, its sheer scope is insanely impressive and allows for tons of exploration. On the other, the city is laid out like an elaborate maze and it can be pretty damn frustrating figuring out where to go. All of these areas just blend into each other and it's really easy to get lost in your first playthrough. This was a major turnoff for me on my first playthrough and it's one of the main reasons I put the game down. The next section that comes after is the Clock Tower, an area that many argue to be the most iconic Resident Evil level. And yeah, I just don't see it. I love the Clock Tower because it brings back that tight, compact, classic RE feel, but after solving 2 puzzles, you're basically done. It's a very short area and I quite frankly don't get the hype around it. After that is the hospital, which is the most disappointing area to me. Hospital settings in the zombie story are grotesque, chaotic, and filled to the brim with undead, since there will understandably be a lot of infected individuals wandering around. Here though, the hospital is pretty vacant aside from the 100 betas, and it goes by faster than the clock tower. Then there's Raccoon City Park, which also connects to the cemetery, which is another quick section, and the Umbrella facility, which lacks any of the personality the previous 2 Umbrella labs we've seen had. I'm sorry, but I said it earlier and I'll say it again, these locations are not at all interesting, especially compared with the dynamic environments we were introduced to in the other games. Switching over to the game's puzzles, a lot of them are hit and miss. There are some good ones in here, but the majority are either stupidly easy or insanely hard, such as the infamous water puzzle seen at the end of the game. Man, I remember when that one stumped me. Yeah, my friend had to help me out a little with that one. Their name was Google. But what about the extra content the game has? Well, one major new feature is the Mercenaries Mode, an action-packed arcade shooter that sees you trying to rank up an insane amount of score. What's even cooler is a lot of the characters you met in the main game are playable. This mode serves as a fun distraction, and its action aesthetic is a nice change to what players are used to. Not a whole lot to say about Mercenaries, it's a very neat bonus mode that fully embraces the action side of RE3. And like the last 2 games, it's highly encouraged you speedrun this game after your first playthrough and try to obtain a high rank. If you take Mercenaries speedruns and the randomized experience RE3 offers, and this game easily has the most replayability the series has seen thus far. And all of this was developed in 1 year after initially being an indie spin-off. Resident Evil 3's gameplay experience is nothing short of magical. It has an insane amount of innovations and new features that allow it to excel past its predecessors in technical ability, and there is so much to do even after your first playthrough. While things like the dodge and locations are lackluster, this game is super fun and its more chaotic nature makes it stand out as something entirely different. But we're not done with Resident Evil 3, nowhere near in fact. We still have a story to cover. You should know by now that Resident Evil has a heavy narrative focus of an insane amount of lore that increases with each and every new title. Like we mentioned earlier, RE3 was originally meant to be an expansion of RE2 that showed off more of the city, and that vision hasn't been lost with the promotion of a main title. Because of that, RE3 takes place both before and after the story of RE2. In order to familiarize returning players with this new story, the decision was ultimately made to have Jill Valentine, one of the 2 main characters seen in the original, to return. While seeing a new character may have been interesting, both me and a lot of people loved Jill in RE1, and I think it was a nice choice to bring her back since she would understandably still be living in Raccoon City, and RE2 made it clear Chris had already left to stop Umbrella. But what is the story this time about? Well, I'll allow Jill to tell you.
It all began as an ordinary day in September. An ordinary day in Raccoon City. A city controlled by Umbrella. No one dared to oppose them, and that lack of strength would ultimately lead to their destruction. I suppose they had to suffer the consequences of their actions, but there would be no forgiveness. If only they had had the courage to fight. It's true that once the wheels of justice begin to turn, nothing can stop them. Nothing. It was Raccoon City's last chance, and my last chance. My last escape.
This is Chopper Delta, preparing to drop off at area E95070. Over.
What are they?
So yeah, Raccoon City is fucked. Now, what I love about this game is how much it stresses the need to escape. This pressure was felt in the last 2 games, but it was nowhere near close to RE3, where Jill is one of the few survivors of a citywide massacre and has to get the hell out of here before she joins one of the other rotting corpses. And the game quite literally starts off with a bang as Jill is propelled forward out of her flaming apartment and has to instantly seek shelter. She runs into some random dude who's freaking out and decides to cower in a container, unwilling to step outside. Jill does so because she's a fucking MVP, and the more you explore of the city, the more you realize how hopeless the situation is. Everywhere you look, there's no sign of human life, only destruction and roaming monsters. Eventually, you meet Brad Vickers. Yep, the same Brad Vickers from the first game who left your ass. It's nice to see him return since we didn't get a whole lot of him in RE1, but then he starts rambling about something weird.
Brad, hang in there. Why isn't someone doing something about this?
I didn't know you were still alive, Jill. The police aren't trained for this kind of situation. What could they do? Listen, he's coming for us. We're both gonna die.
What are you saying?
You'll see. He's after STARS members. There's no escape.
Huh, I wonder what he's talking about. Anyways, you make it to the RPD, which returns from the second game when this happens.
Jill!
Brad!
We've gotta...
That is how you do an introduction. I want to commend RE3 on how well it builds up Nemesis before he just fucking shows up out of nowhere and kills Brad right away, often the only other STARS member in the city. The game makes it clearly apparent that this creature is big cheese. It turns out this creature is specifically designed tyrant meant to track down and kill all remaining STARS members in the city, since after all, they all saw what Umbrella was really up to in RE1. Jill either kicks his ass or narrowly escapes. Now I just want to talk about how much I love the RPD returning. You get to visit it pre-RE2, and while it doesn't look different at all, tiny details like certain doors being boarded up and other puzzles being solved is just awesome. And plus, it makes the 2 games feel infinitely more connected. Jill escapes the precinct and comes across a man by the name of Carlos Oliveira, a Umbrella mercenary. Jill is understandably skeptical and suspicious, but Carlos assures her he's just a mercenary and doesn't know about what the company is up to. I really like this bit of lore. With the pharmaceutical giant Umbrella is, it understandably has to only fill the higher-ups in on what they're doing, and keep lower-ranked employees like their mercenaries in the dark. It also lets the players think about how many employees at Umbrella are actually innocent workers a part of the company, unaware of its more nefarious motives. Now, regarding Carlos, I like him. While there's nothing beyond his surface level, he's just a genuine guy who wants to get out of the city with a little sass behind him. And he's Jill's closest ally throughout the game. And it's a cool twist that you have to side and survive with people a part of Umbrella despite any of them not actually being a company higher up. Jill meets the rest of Carlos' squad, which comprises of a heavily injured man named Michael and a shady guy named Nikolai. Together, the team decides to power up the cable car and head to the clock tower where evac chopper is on standby. While getting the parts necessary, this happens.
What did you do?
I had no choice. He was about to turn into a zombie. It would have been a threat, so I eliminated it.
But he was still conscious, wasn't he?
He was as good as dead. And it took fewer bullets to kill him now than it would have if he had transformed.
Yeah, shady might be a little bit of an understatement. Afterwards, an onslaught of zombies attack and Nikolai is presumably killed. Jill makes it to the cable car and the crew sets off, but not before they pick up an unfriendly hitchhiker.
Mikhail!
Jill! Get out of the cable car now!
Mikhail, wait! Don't!
Get out of here! Hurry!
Rest in peace, Michael. In the few seconds we've known you, you showed great courage. The cable car starts derailing and it eventually crashes. However, both Jill and Carlos still make it to the clock tower. Jill finds a way to signal the chopper, and it works! The chopper arrives. Jill's nightmare is finished.
We're saved. Down here! It's finally over. Huh?
Nemesis is not done with Valentine, and right after he infects her with the T-virus. The unrelenting creature is fought off and it limps away. Carlos finds the infected Jill and takes her to the cathedral where she's slowly dying. I actually really love this. This game does a great job of making you feel all hope is lost, because it is. Inside of her, and she knows she's as good as dead. You didn't take control of Carlos, who goes outside and enters the hospital where he comes across the vicious hunter betas and gammas. However, Carlos finds something here. A miracle. It turns out in the hospital's desperate attempt to combat the T-virus infection, they had successfully engineered a vaccine before it failed. As he begins creating it, mostly using automated machines and instructions, he runs into Nikolai, who reveals himself to be an Umbrella supervisor. He's about to kill Carlos when the man he just fatally wounded decides to go out with a bang, and this sends Nikolai out the window. Now, I think it's a good time to mention how mixed I am with Nikolai's character. On one hand, I really love the selfish, money-hungry mercenaries willing to do anything to get a larger bonus from his employers. However, the twist that he's actually a bad guy doesn't work because from the start, this game does everything in its power to show how shady he is. And plus, the whole psych I'm actually working with Umbrella twist was already done in RE1 in the form of Wesker, so he just comes off as a stereotypical twist villain, without the twist. Carlos finishes the vaccine and escapes the hospital just in time before Nikolai's charge blows it to smithereens. Carlos reaches Jill again and he cures her of the T-virus. The two get a move on, and as Jill moves to Raccoon Park, we find out exactly what a supervisor's job is. It turns out Umbrella sent a group of undercover supervisors to destroy any evidence of Umbrella's involvement with the outbreak and record combat data based on the mercenaries' struggle to survive. Yep, every Umbrella mercenary except for Nikolai was sent to this city to die. Classic Umbrella. Anyways, after another run-in with Nikolai and killing the Gravedigger because of course Jill does, she arrives at a vacant Umbrella factory. Here, she meets Carlos, who drops a bombshell, which is the fact an actual bombshell is about to drop on Raccoon City and blow it all up. Yeah, that's bad. Jill makes it to the facility when she has yet another run-in with Nikolai.
You're still wandering around.
Nikolai? So, you want to get out of here alone? Is that your plan?
I made certain none of the other supervisors survived. Since I'll be the only one who knows what really happened, I'll have more bargaining power when it comes to discussing my bonus.
Then why kill me? I'm not on their payroll.
They want you eliminated for reasons of their own. The amount is modest, but there is a reward to be claimed upon the confirmation of your death.
That's great. Except I have no intention of contributing to your retirement fund.
Huh. For some reason, I don't think he'll be getting that bonus. Jill encounters Nemesis, who's had better days, and the two fight before the tyrant is ultimately destroyed and its body is discarded. I guess you could say Jill took out the trash. Except she didn't, because Nemesis is not dead. Yep, this unrecognizable blob is Nemesis, who's still clinging to life. In order to end this unstoppable weapon of destruction, Jill uses a stationary unfinished weapon constructed by Umbrella named the Rail Cannon, which basically shoots a fucking laser beam. After using it to end Nemesis once and for all, it turns out it is not dead. You didn't have two options. You can finish it off yourself or leave it to die in the ensuing explosion. You already know which one I picked. I don't care what anyone says, this is still the most badass line in Resident Evil history.
I guess we're all set.
Alright then, we're out of here.
Oh no.
It's here. It's time to go.
That's it. I've had it. This time they've gone too far.
And that concludes the era of Raccoon City. Wow, what an ending. Can I just say I love the decision to nuke the city? Not only does the addition of an incoming nuke add more urgency to the climax, but I also think this was an insanely fitting ending to cap off the Raccoon City trilogy, and it also ensures the setting doesn't get milked to death and the following sequels will all branch out and take place in different locations. As for the story, I like it. It's simple, straightforward, and has some pretty damn cool highlights. My main problem is despite the neat lore contributions, we didn't really find out a whole lot from this entry regarding the larger narrative. At least nowhere near the extent in Resident Evil 2. Also, while Jill and Carlos are strong protagonists, I feel they're not as memorable as the STARS team members in RE2's cast of characters. Overall, this story is pretty strong and it is worthy of belonging to an RE game. In conclusion, Resident Evil 3 is a game I was not expecting to love. However, I finally get what so many people love about it. The innovations it brought to the table were amazing, ambitious, and most of all, risky, but most of those risks paid off. The gameplay experience keeps the magic of the previous two while keeping things fresh, and the story is a fun ride. I genuinely wasn't expecting to like this game as much as I did, and while I think RE2 is still a stronger title, Resident Evil 3 is not only a game I really like, but most of all, a game I really respect. And I will see you next time with Resident Evil Code Veronica. Peace out.